The night was quiet in Lowe's Angels, but inside a dimly lit room, Sandra Bullock sat alone, holding a letter she had never dared to send. Her hands trembled as she read the words she had written years ago, words that revealed her hidden feelings for Keanu Reeves. Her heart raced, because tonight, for the first time, she wondered if it was finally time to speak them out loud. From the outside, people saw her as strong, confident, always smiling. But inside, she carried a weight. The weight of emotions left unspoken, of memories shared but never confessed. She thought about the movie they once made together, the bond they built on set, and how even after decades, the connection never faded. Keanu was different. Unlike the people around Hollywood who lived for attention, he lived quietly, humbly, almost invisibly at times. Sandra admired that. She remembered how he once gave up his seat for an exhausted crew member, how he shared his food with strangers without anyone noticing. Those little acts of kindness had stayed with her, carving deep respect into her heart. But respect had slowly grown into something more. It became admiration. Then it became longing, and eventually it became love, silent, patient, unspoken love. As she sat with the letter in her hand, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Keanu. Nothing grand, nothing unusual, just a simple text. "Hey, are you free tomorrow? I'd love to see you." Her chest tightened. She whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, is the day I finally tell him." That night, she barely slept. Memories came back like waves. She remembered a moment long ago when she was going through heartbreak. Keanu had called her out of nowhere, not even knowing what she was facing. He spoke gently, saying, "I don't know what's going on, but I just felt like I should check on you." How did he know? How could he always sense when she was hurting? Morning arrived, and with it came both fear and hope. She dressed simply, no makeup, no glamour, just herself. When she reached the small cafe Keanu had suggested, she saw him waiting outside, holding 2 coffees. His smile was warm, his posture relaxed, but his eyes carried stories only someone who had lived through pain and kindness could carry. "I got your favorite," he said softly, handing her the cup. She smiled, but her voice trembled. "You always remember." They sat inside, away from the noise of the world. For a while they talked about life, about ordinary things, movies, books, even the traffic. Yet under every word there was something unsaid, something pressing on Sandra's chest. She looked at him, studying the lines on his face, the quiet strength in his eyes. She thought, if I don't say it now, I might never say it. But then came the conflict. Fear whispered inside her. What if he didn't feel the same? What if this confession destroyed their friendship? Her hands shook. She gripped the cup tighter. Keanu noticed. He leaned closer and asked, "Are you okay?" In that moment, her heart screamed louder than her fear. She whispered so softly it almost broke her, "Keanu, there's something I've wanted to tell you for years." His face grew serious. His eyes locked on hers, steady, patient, kind. The cafe felt silent. The world outside moved fast, but inside time stood still. Sandra's voice cracked as she continued. I've had feelings for you, more than just friendship. I never said it because I was afraid. But I can't keep it inside anymore." The air between them grew heavy. Her heart pounded so loud she thought he might hear it. For a second, Keanu said nothing. He just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Suspense filled her chest. Had she made a mistake? Had she just broken the one bond she treasured most? Then Keanu placed his cup down slowly. His hand reached across the table, resting gently on hers. His voice was calm, almost a whisper. "Sandra, do you know how many times I wanted to tell you the same thing?" Her eyes widened. Her breath caught in her throat. He continued, "I didn't want to lose what we had. I didn't want to risk it, but I've felt it too. For a long, long time." Her world spun. Relief, shock, and tears all came at once. But even in that moment of confession, there was no rush, no drama, only quiet truth, spoken with respect, humility, and kindness. Their eyes locked, both of them finally unburdened. Yet this was only the beginning, because love, no matter how pure, is never without trials. What awaited them beyond this moment would test their resilience, their trust, and their hearts in ways they never imagined. And so their story truly began here, at a small cafe with whispered feelings and a reaction that changed everything. The cafe door opened and a cool breeze slipped inside, but Sandra barely noticed. Her entire world had just shifted. Keanu's words were still echoing in her chest. She had imagined so many ways he might react, confusion, silence, or even rejection, but never this. Never the quiet truth that he, too, had carried the same hidden feelings. Her heart was racing so fast that she almost forgot how to breathe. For years, she had lived with the question, always wondering what might happen if she told him. Now the question was gone, replaced by a new one. What would come next? Keanu's hand was still resting on hers, steady and warm. It wasn't the grip of someone uncertain. It was calm, strong, and honest. Sandra felt her eyes sting with tears she didn't want to hide anymore. She whispered, "You mean it?" His gaze softened and he nodded slowly. "Yes, I mean it. I've cared for you for a long time, longer than I should admit. I just thought maybe you were happier not knowing." Those words shook her. How many nights had they both sat alone, feeling the same longing but keeping it hidden out of fear? But before she could answer, a waiter walked past, breaking the stillness. The normal noise of the cafe came rushing back. The clinking of cups, laughter from a group at the counter, the faint hum of music. It almost felt unreal that the world continued so casually while her own had just been rewritten. Keanu leaned back slightly, giving her a chance to gather her breath. His voice was gentle but curious. "Sandra, what made you decide to tell me now?" She looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger, and said, "Because I realized I've been living in fear for too long. Fear of losing what we already had. But last night when I was alone, I asked myself, what if I never get the chance to tell you? What if I keep this inside forever?" And I couldn't bear the thought of leaving it unsaid. Keanu nodded slowly, his expression unreadable yet full of quiet respect. "That's brave," he whispered. "Braver than anything I've done." Her lips curved into a faint smile, though her chest was still heavy with emotion. "You've done plenty of brave things, Keanu. You live with such kindness. You give so much of yourself to others. I think that's braver than any confession." He looked at her, and for a moment there was silence again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that holds truth. Yet under this honesty there was another conflict rising. Sandra felt it inside her like a shadow. Even if they admitted their feelings, could they truly move forward? Both of them carried complicated lives. Both of them had past scars, and the world outside wasn't always gentle to people in their place. Her thoughts were interrupted when Keanu spoke again. "You know, I've always believed love should never take away someone's freedom. That's why I stayed silent. I didn't want you to feel pressured or tied to me." She blinked at him, her heart aching at his humility. "You didn't want to hold me back." "Exactly," he said softly. "You've built your own world, your career, your family, your life. I didn't want to step into that and ruin it." Her voice trembled as she answered, "But don't you see? You've always been a part of my life even when you weren't beside me. Every act of kindness, every call, every word. It stayed with me. You didn't ruin anything. You made me stronger." Keanu lowered his head as though her words were too heavy to hold. When he lifted his gaze again, his eyes shone with quiet emotion. "Then maybe we've both been carrying the same fear, and maybe it's time we stop." The conversation was pulling them deeper, breaking walls that had stood for decades. Yet with every truth spoken, another layer of suspense grew. What would happen if the world found out? What would their friends say? How would it change everything? They left the cafe and walked together down a quiet street. The morning sun was climbing higher, casting soft light on the sidewalks. Sandra noticed something. Keanu walked at her pace, never rushing ahead, never pulling behind, always beside her. As they walked, a young boy selling flowers approached them. He looked no older than 12, his clothes worn, his eyes tired but hopeful. He held out a small bunch of wildflowers and said, "Please, just $1." Sandra reached for her purse, but Keanu gently stopped her. He knelt down to the boy's level, looked him in the eyes, and handed him not $1, but 20. The boy's eyes widened. Keanu smiled softly and said, "Keep the flowers. Give them to your mother. Tell her she's special." The boy stood frozen for a moment, then ran off, shouting with joy. Sandra felt her chest swell. It wasn't the money, it was the way Keanu treated the boy with dignity, as if he mattered deeply. She whispered to herself, "This is why I," but her voice faded before she could finish. Keanu turned to her. "Why you what?" She swallowed hard. "This is why I love you." His eyes softened again, but this time there was no hesitation. He reached out, brushed a strand of hair away from her face, and whispered back, "Then let me show you what that love can mean." For the first time in years, she felt the weight lift from her chest. But just as hope was filling her heart, something unexpected happened. Her phone rang. She almost ignored it, but the name flashing on the screen froze her. It was someone from her past, someone she thought she had left behind. She answered hesitantly, and the voice on the other end carried news that shook her. Words that threatened to test the very bond she and Keanu had just begun to reveal. Her hand trembled as she ended the call. Keanu noticed her sudden change and asked quietly, "What's wrong?" She looked at him, fear clouding her eyes. "Keanu, something's happened, something that could change everything for us." The day that had begun with whispered feelings was now turning into something much larger. What Sandra had confessed, what Keanu had admitted, was only the beginning of a storm that neither of them saw coming. The phone call echoed in Sandra's mind long after it ended. Her hands were still trembling, her heart beating faster than it had when she confessed her feelings to Keanu. The words she heard felt heavy, like chains pulling her back into a world she thought she had left behind. Keanu noticed her silence as they continued walking down the quiet street. He slowed his pace, turning his head toward her. "Sandra," he said gently, "you don't have to hide it. Tell me what's going on." Her throat tightened. She wanted to protect this fragile new truth between them, to keep the warmth of his hand on hers untarnished. But secrets had a way of growing heavier when carried alone. "It was from someone I haven't spoken to in years," she finally whispered. "An old friend from my past, but also someone who knows parts of me I've tried to bury. They said they needed me. Urgently." And it sounded serious. Keanu's face softened, but his eyes held quiet strength. "Then we face it," he said simply. "Together." Those words stunned her. For so long she had carried her battles alone. She was used to being the one who held others, who stayed strong, who smiled even when her heart ached. But now Keanu stood beside her, ready to share the weight without hesitation. They found a bench in a small park nearby, the morning sun filtering through the trees. The world seemed calm around them, children playing, people walking their dogs, yet inside Sandra's chest was a storm. "I don't want this to pull us apart," she admitted, her voice cracking. "We just found the courage to tell the truth, and already something is testing it." Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze steady on her. "Life doesn't wait for the perfect timing. It throws storms at us when we least expect them, but storms don't always mean destruction. Sometimes they show us how strong we really are." His words struck her deeply. His resilience wasn't loud, wasn't boastful. It was quiet, steady, the kind that gave others courage without demanding recognition. Sandra took a shaky breath. "They said there's trouble back home. Someone I used to care about is in danger of losing everything. They asked for my help, and I don't know if I can turn away." Keanu's hand reached for hers again, grounding her. "Then help them," he said softly. "Kindness has always been your strength, Sandra. Don't silence it now." Tears pooled in her eyes. "But what if it changes the way you see me?" His brow furrowed slightly, as if the thought itself pained him. "It won't. If anything, it makes me respect you more." For a moment, silence hung between them again, filled only by the sound of wind moving through the leaves. Then, to ease the heaviness, Keanu told her a story. "Years ago," he began, "I was walking home late one night. I saw a man sitting on the sidewalk, shivering. Everyone walked past him, pretending not to see. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't rich, I wasn't powerful, but I had my jacket. So I gave it to him. He cried, not because of the jacket, but because someone finally stopped. That night, I learned that sometimes showing up is enough." Sandra listened, her heart softening even more. He wasn't trying to lecture her. He was reminding her that helping others didn't require perfection, only presence. "Maybe that's what you're being asked to do," he added, "to show up." His words lit a fire inside her. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. "Then I can't ignore it. I have to go." "Then I'll go with you," Keanu said without hesitation. She turned to him in shock. "You don't have to. This isn't your problem." "If it matters to you," he replied, his voice steady, "then it matters to me." Sandra felt her chest tighten again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something stronger, something grounding. They stood from the bench and began walking again, planning their next steps. But even as they spoke, Sandra couldn't shake the unease gnawing at her heart. The friend who had called her wasn't just anyone. There were complicated histories, old wounds, and unresolved mistakes tied to that name. And deep down, she feared that opening that door again might pull her into places she had worked so hard to leave behind. As they walked past a bookstore, Sandra paused, her eyes catching on a window display. A simple phrase was written on the glass in bold letters. "Every story has a turning point." She stared at it, her chest tightening. Keanu noticed her pause and followed her gaze. His lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Maybe this is yours," she nodded slowly, whispering. "Then I hope we're strong enough to face it." What neither of them knew was that the call Sandra received wasn't just about a friend in need. Hidden behind the words was a deeper truth, one that could challenge their bond and force them into choices that would test the very limits of their love, kindness, and resilience. And while Sandra worried about protecting what they had, fate was already weaving a path that would shake them both in ways they could not yet imagine. The air outside carried a strange heaviness as Sandra and Keanu walked together, side by side, toward what neither of them could fully understand yet. The message from Sandra's past still echoed in her heart, but there was something about having Keanu next to her that gave her the strength to keep moving. Still, doubts pressed against her like shadows. She kept hearing the same voice in her head, the voice of her old friend who had once been so close, almost like family. Years ago, they had shared laughter, secrets, and even tears, but time had separated them. Mistakes had drawn invisible lines between them, and silence had widened the distance. Now, suddenly, that same person was reaching out, calling for help. Keanu noticed the quiet storm inside her. He didn't rush her, didn't demand answers. Instead, he let her speak when she was ready. Finally, she whispered, "I don't even know if I'm strong enough to face them again. I walked away for a reason. I didn't want to carry their pain on top of mine." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. His voice was calm but full of weight. "Strength doesn't mean you don't feel fear, Sandra. Strength means you keep going even with the fear inside you. You don't owe the world perfection, you only owe it your honesty." His words sank deep. She looked at him, seeing the quiet conviction in his eyes. It wasn't the grand speeches or loud declarations that made Keanu who he was. It was the way he carried his truths silently, consistently, even when no one was watching. "You make it sound so simple," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "It isn't simple, but it's real." They walked further until they reached Sandra's car. She hesitated before unlocking it. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Are you sure you want to come with me? This won't be easy." Keanu leaned against the car door, his posture relaxed but his eyes serious. "I've never been afraid of hard things. I've been afraid of losing people I care about. And right now, I care about you too much to let you face this alone." Her chest tightened at his words. She didn't reply, she simply unlocked the car and let him in. The road ahead stretched endlessly, and as she drove, her mind drifted back to memories she hadn't touched in years. Laughter with her old friend, promises they had once made, and the painful moment when betrayal split them apart. She remembered tears, arguments, and the silence that followed. As if reading her thoughts, Keanu asked gently, "What happened between you two?" She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "We built dreams together once. But when life got difficult, they chose a path I couldn't follow. They hurt me in ways I didn't think I could forgive, and instead of fighting for the friendship, I walked away. I told myself it was for the best, but the truth is, part of me has always wondered if I abandoned them." Keanu sat quietly for a moment before answering. "Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, sometimes it's survival. But maybe life is giving you another chance now, not to erase the past, but to write a new chapter." His words lingered in her heart. Hours later, they reached a small, quiet town. The streets were lined with old buildings, worn with time. Sandra hadn't been here in years, and the sight of it made her chest ache. They parked near a modest house at the edge of the street. Sandra's hands shook as she held the car keys. "This is it," she whispered. Keanu placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to rush, breathe, you're not alone anymore." His calm presence gave her enough courage to step out. Together, they walked to the door. Before she could knock, the door opened. Standing there was her old friend, eyes tired, face older, but still carrying traces of the person she once knew. The reunion was not filled with joy. Instead, it was heavy, uncertain. The friend's eyes glistened as they whispered, "You came." Sandra nodded slowly. "I did because you asked." The three of them sat inside the dimly lit house. Silence stretched, broken only by the ticking of an old clock on the wall. Finally, her friend spoke, their voice cracking with regret. "I made mistakes, Sandra, terrible ones, and I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm losing everything. I didn't know who else to call." Sandra's throat tightened. Years of emotions rushed back all at once. Anger, sadness, compassion. She wanted to walk away, but she also wanted to stay. Keanu sat beside her, quiet, letting her lead. His silence was not empty. It was supportive, protective, like a shield she didn't know she needed. "Tell me what happened," she said finally. Her friend began to explain. Debts, wrong choices, and betrayal from people they had once trusted. Life had cornered them, leaving them desperate and alone. As Sandra listened, she realized something. This wasn't just about money or mistakes. This was about a broken spirit, about someone drowning in regret. Tears burned in her eyes. She looked at Keanu, who gave her a simple nod. No words, just trust. She turned back to her friend. "I don't know if I can fix everything, but I can be here. I can listen. I can stand with you." Her friend broke down, covering their face with their hands. "I don't deserve your kindness." Sandra's voice was steady but tender. "Maybe not, but kindness isn't about deserving, it's about choosing. And today, I choose to be here." Keanu's hand brushed hers again under the table, reminding her she wasn't alone in this choice. But as the night stretched on, shadows grew outside the house. What none of them realized was that the past had not just called for help. It had also awakened old enemies, people who would not welcome Sandra's return. And soon, both she and Keanu would find themselves standing in the middle of a storm far greater than they expected. One that would test not only their bond, but also their courage to hold on to kindness when darkness tried to tear it away. The night was deep and still, but inside the small house, tension wrapped around Sandra, Keanu, and her old friend like an invisible chain. The lamps cast soft shadows across the room, and every tick of the old clock on the wall seemed louder, sharper, like a warning of what was about to come. Sandra sat with her hands folded, trying to stay calm. She had thought that confessing her feelings to Keanu would be the hardest thing she would ever do. But now, faced with the weight of her friend's broken past and the uncertainty of what danger might come next, she realized her heart had more battles to fight. Her friend looked exhausted, their voice shaking. "I didn't just lose money, Sandra. I lost trust. The people I once called partners turned on me. They want revenge, and now they know you're here." Those words landed heavily. Sandra felt a chill crawl down her spine. She turned toward the window, staring into the dark street outside. The silence felt too heavy, too unnatural, as though the shadows themselves were listening. Keanu shifted in his chair, calm but alert. His eyes scanned the room, then landed on Sandra. "This isn't safe," he said quietly but with certainty. "If they're coming, we need to be ready." Sandra's breath quickened. "You mean they might come here tonight?" Her friend lowered their head, guilt spilling into their voice. "I'm sorry, I never meant to pull you into this, but once they know you're connected to me, they won't stop." Keanu leaned forward, his hands steady on his knees. "Fear makes people reckless, but we can't let fear decide our choices." He looked at Sandra, his gaze holding hers. "Whatever happens, we face it together." The way he said it, calm, unwavering, sent both comfort and fear into her heart. She knew Keanu was no stranger to hardship, no stranger to pain. But the thought of him being dragged into this storm because of her made her chest ache. The minutes crawled by, each one thick with suspense. Outside, the wind rattled the trees and footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. Sandra's pulse raced. Suddenly there was a knock at the door, not gentle, not polite, sharp, heavy, demanding. The room froze, her friend's face turned pale. "It's them," they whispered. Sandra's stomach dropped. Every instinct told her to run, but Keanu stood slowly, his posture calm, his presence unshaken. He placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her, and whispered, "Trust me." The knock came again, louder this time. Her friend moved to the corner of the room, trembling. Sandra wanted to say something, to protest, but Keanu was already walking toward the door. He paused, his hand on the handle, then glanced back at her. His eyes were steady, strong, and filled with a quiet courage that gave her strength. When he opened the door, two men stood outside, their faces cold, their presence heavy with threat. One of them smirked. "So this is where you've been hiding," he said, his voice dripping with malice. His eyes then shifted toward Sandra and his smirk widened. "And you brought company." Sandra felt her chest tighten. Fear pressed against her ribs, but Keanu didn't flinch. He stood in the doorway, calm, his voice even. "This isn't the way. Whatever you're here for, it doesn't have to end in violence." The men exchanged glances, then laughed. "You think words will fix this? Debts don't vanish with kindness." Keanu didn't move. "But anger doesn't heal either." The tension was suffocating. Sandra's friend whispered frantically from behind, "Please don't provoke them," but Keanu wasn't provoking. He was steady, unyielding, holding his ground with respect rather than force. His calmness seemed to unsettle the men more than threats ever could. Finally, one of them stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You don't know what you're stepping into. This isn't your fight." Keanu's voice grew firm, though still soft. "If it matters to her, then it's mine too." Sandra's heart shook at his words. She wanted to cry, not from fear, but from the depth of his loyalty. The men studied him for a moment longer, then turned their eyes toward Sandra. One of them sneered. "You always did know how to attract protectors, but this won't end here. We'll be back." And just like that, they turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. The door closed, and Sandra's knees nearly gave out. She leaned against the wall, her breath shallow. Keanu returned to her side instantly, his hand steady on her arm. "It's okay," he whispered. "They're gone for now." Her friend sank into a chair, shaking. "They won't stop, Sandra. They'll keep coming until everything is taken." Sandra sat beside them, her voice trembling but strong. "Then we don't let them, we stand together." Keanu nodded, his eyes filled with quiet conviction. "Storms don't scare me. But walking away from people who need me, that's what I can't live with. Sandra's tears finally fell, but they weren't just from fear. They were from the realization that she wasn't alone anymore. For years, she had carried her battles in silence, but now, with Keanu by her side, the weight felt lighter, even in the face of danger. Yet deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The men's words lingered like a shadow. "We'll be back." The fight wasn't over. The real test of their resilience and bond was only just beginning. And in the coming days, Sandra would be forced to make choices that would not only define her future, but also reveal just how deep Keanu's quiet strength truly ran. The night after the men left felt endless. Sandra sat by the window, watching the shadows move across the empty street, her mind heavy with fear and questions. Keanu sat nearby, calm, quiet, his presence like an anchor holding her in place. Her old friend had fallen asleep in the chair, exhaustion pulling them into restless dreams, but Sandra couldn't close her eyes. She whispered, "They'll come back, Keanu. You heard them. I don't know if I can handle this." He leaned forward, his voice steady, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "You're stronger than you think, Sandra. I've seen you face storms before. This one may look bigger, but the strength you need is already inside you." His words steadied her trembling heart, but the doubt remained. What if their anger hurts you? What if it destroys everything between us before we've even had a chance to live it? Keanu shook his head, his eyes calm. "Love isn't about avoiding storms, it's about holding on through them, and I'm not leaving. Not now, not ever." His voice had a finality to it, a promise spoken not with grand gestures but with quiet certainty. The next day, the air felt heavier. Sandra's friend confessed the full truth. They had signed their name on dangerous papers years ago, and those men were now using that as a weapon. If the debt wasn't repaid, they would not only destroy her friend but also drag Sandra's name into the fire. Hearing this, Sandra felt a mixture of anger and sadness. She wanted to shout, to ask why her friend had been so reckless. But instead, she saw the tears in their eyes and realized they already carried the weight of regret heavier than any words she could throw. Sandra stood up, her voice calm but determined. "Then we fight this not with fear, not with anger, but with truth. I won't let them use kindness as weakness." Her friend looked at her, broken but hopeful. "Why are you still here? I don't deserve your help." She placed her hand gently on theirs. "Because life isn't about what we deserve, it's about what we choose to give, and today I choose forgiveness." Those words unlocked something inside her heart. Years of hidden hurt began to soften. Keanu, who had listened silently, stepped closer and said, "Then let's show them what forgiveness and courage look like when they stand together." That night the men returned, their steps heavy on the porch, their voices sharp and threatening. But when they entered, they didn't find a broken house. They found Sandra standing tall, Keanu by her side, and her friend facing them without running. "Take what's owed," one of the men snarled. Sandra's voice rang out, steady and calm. "You think power comes from fear, but it doesn't. It comes from respect. It comes from kindness. You may take money, but you will never take the dignity we choose to keep." Her words struck deeper than they expected. The men shifted uncomfortably, their confidence cracking. Keanu stepped forward, his tone even, his eyes steady. "Walk away now, not because you fear us, but because you choose to end this cycle. You can keep chasing anger, but it will never heal you. Only letting go will." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then slowly the men lowered their gaze. They muttered threats as they backed out the door, but their steps were weaker, their presence less certain. When the door shut, Sandra's knees buckled, but Keanu caught her. Her tears fell freely this time, not just from fear, but from release. Her friend wept openly, whispering, "You saved me. I don't know how to repay this." Sandra's voice was gentle, almost like a whisper. "Repay it by living better, by choosing kindness where you once chose anger." Keanu wrapped his arm around her shoulders, steadying her, grounding her. For the first time in years, Sandra felt the weight of silence leave her chest. The bond she once thought might never be spoken was now alive, stronger, tested in fire, and still standing. Days later, as the sun set over the hills, Sandra and Keanu walked together along a quiet path. The storm had passed, but its lessons remained. She turned to him, her voice soft but full of emotion. "I never thought I'd be able to say this out loud, but thank you for standing with me, for showing me love that doesn't run away." Keanu looked at her, his eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "Thank you for trusting me. Love isn't about perfect moments, Sandra. It's about showing up when everything feels impossible." She smiled, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Then promise me one thing. Promise me we'll keep showing up no matter how hard it gets." He squeezed her hand gently. "I promise." And there, under the quiet evening sky, Sandra finally let her heart rest. She had whispered her feelings once, afraid of breaking the bond. But now, with Keanu beside her, she no longer needed to whisper. Their love had been tested, broken open, and rebuilt into something unshakable. Something stronger than fear, deeper than regret, and brighter than any shadow that tried to fall over them.